I want to go straight to our final panelist, Mira Sorvino, an actress, not just an actress, an Oscar-winning actress, a UNODC Goodwill ambassador for the global fight against human trafficking. Welcome, Mira. You made many films about human trafficking. What made you decide on that topic?
Well, the reason that I made the first film called Human Trafficking actually in 2004, I believe, was because I was working with Amnesty International as their Stop Violence Against Women campaign spokesperson. But I was shocked, I think like everyone else, that slavery is alive and well, and you know, having grown up in a country which prided itself in the Emancipation Proclamation of our President Lincoln, and I actually participated in an event with Jean at the Lincoln Cottage on the anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation in the United States, the proclamation that President Lincoln made to end slavery in our country. The fact that it's thriving now in an illicit form rather than the legal chattel slavery of the past is just simply unacceptable and incomprehensible, and especially that it does such damage to children worldwide. As a mother, is so egregious, so horrendous. Once I made the film Human Trafficking, I began to meet with victims and survivors of human trafficking, and that really revolutionized my life, because I go around with the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime to various countries and meet with NGOs and victims and survivors and advocates. And when you meet a child who's 7 years old, who was brought to a brothel by relatives at the age of 3 and dropped off to work there full-time until she was rescued at age 7, doing acts that she could only term as incorrectos. She was so little she couldn't even say what she was doing. To know that she was used by men as a prostitute at the age of 3 to 7, it's so repulsive and so heartbreaking that you have to galvanize and you have to say that if you are aware of this and you're not doing anything about it, then you're part of the problem. And we all have to be part of the solution. And this is something that affects every single society. I really, truly, I'm not convinced that there's any country on earth that is not touched by human trafficking. And I think that what movies do and what media do, and whether they're fictional or documentary, and even the shorter form that are found on news programs or online, is they create the dialogue and the awareness that can wake up people's hearts and minds, and then feed back to the governments that we've elected and say, this is the mandate of the people that this must stop. You know, I've been speaking to people here in Baku, and we've had such a beautiful reception here, really a wonderful time. But I feel that not everyone here knows that also in Azerbaijan, just as in the United States, just as in Spain, just as in Africa, just as in everywhere, there is human trafficking. And you have NGOs working on it here, and your government is working on it here, but there's so much work to be done. And I think that everything we can do to amplify this message, that it's here in labor, in specific here, you have issues of it in construction. You know, obviously this is a country that's growing and building itself with the great wealth that you have from natural resources. And I know your president spoke on the opening about having an open society that was focused on human capital. And as a mother, there's a phrase where people say, you're only as happy as your unhappiest child. I think as a people, you can only be as happy and prosperous as your most abused, most impoverished, most suffering member of your society. And human trafficking victims are truly the voiceless. And they are people that are so marginalized that you don't even know they're there, because they're kept under lock and key. They're often from other nationalities, but not necessarily. There are local people here who are being put into slave labor, both in labor and sexual trafficking. But those people who've had their passports confiscated, they're literally in countries where they are afraid of authorities. They're afraid they will be punished if they're discovered and treated as criminals. They have no rights, they have no identities, they have no one to turn to help them, except for NGOs and governments that are looking for them. And so we all have to widen our nets and say, okay, they're among us. We're going to open our eyes, we're going to be frank about this, we're going to be leaders in this. We have made positive strides, but instead of pushing it under the rug, sadly, for some reason recently there's been a decrease in convictions in trafficking here in Azerbaijan. It went from 58 down to something like 10 this last year. And no labor trafficking convictions last year, only sexual. And obviously, if this is growing everywhere in the world, it's growing here. This crime is not going away, so we have to rise up in equal measure to fight it. So I think that any kind of discussion that we're having today, but any useful useful suggestions and mobilization of youth through popular culture, through social media, through consumer campaigns. It was interesting what you were saying about the Body Shop, because I've partnered with the Body Shop and with Ehtn, which is a group called End Child Prostitution and Trafficking. And I've worked with them in England, I've worked with them in Thailand, I've worked with them in the United States. And they did a very interesting thing with the Body Shop and Ehtn, where they would sell a certain project and sign petitions in the store. And they would get hundreds of thousands of consumers' signatures, cost no money at all, and took them then to the governments of these local, these countries, and showed them this is the mandate of the people. They do not want to tolerate slavery within their borders, and you have to step up legislation, you have to step up the training of law enforcement and the judiciary and the prosecutorial staff so that your arrests and convictions go up. Your police officers have to be trained. Corruption has to be fought, because every country is rife with corruption in dealing with this crime. And this got results, and this was an example of a private sector partnership with an NGO that then led to a connection with a government that then led to legislative change. And we're all connected, and the more that we can forge these partnerships, the better off we are. So using the public forum of the arts, literature, news, media, it's all embedded together.
And also the entertainment business. So you are in the entertainment business. How would you, which a job it is to entertain? But how would you raise awareness and stimulate action against trafficking using the entertainment industry?
Well, I have done so with the film Human Trafficking. Actually was one of the groundbreaking pieces of televised film that in the United States really woke people up to the existence of modern-day slavery. I mean, many, many people have told me over the years, I had no idea this was occurring within American borders. I had no idea that we had a big domestic sex slavery problem, especially with underage minors, 300,000 people every year, kids, American kids. And that led to strengthening legislation in Washington. It led to using the film as a lobbying tool for the passage and the repassage of the Trafficking Victims Protection Act. We just did a film well, we shot it in Thailand, but it was set in Cambodia about child sex trafficking in Cambodia called Trade of Innocence. And that movie is one of the first specifically on the theme of just child sex trafficking. And it's so heartbreaking that you cannot watch it and not be moved and not be galvanized at the end with this spirit of fighting this terrible exploitation of our youngest and our most vulnerable. And that has been used to raise money and raise awareness and galvanize political support in Washington. We've raised money for NGOs with it. It can do a lot of good. But just as important, or perhaps even more so, are documentaries which really show the actual situation.
Yeah, but do you think the current films that are made in the US can be used universally? In other words, in other cultures?
Well, I think if they're made very carefully, you know, a human trafficking victim is kind of the same everywhere in a way, because there's someone who's been denied all their basic human rights. They're being abused, they're being compelled to provide labor through force, fraud, or coercion, or if they're a child, you don't even need any of those characteristics. They don't have to be moved, and that's a common misconception about trafficking, that they need to cross borders to be deemed trafficking victims. That's not the case. You can be trafficked right in your hometown. But it all, as the head of Interpol, when we were in Luxor, actually said, you know, to me, basically, if the individual cannot walk out of the situation without the fear of threat to him or herself or their family, it's trafficking. It's being compelled to stay and work out of fear. And every trafficking victim shares that, and they're all afraid, they're all feeling voiceless, they're all trapped. But if you also meet victims and survivors around the world, which I have, and it's given me enormous hope, they all also have an enormous capacity to rebound and to rebuild their lives. It's not a dead end. When you get out of trafficking, you can become a very strong contributing member of society. You can help others, you can become a doctor, lawyer, scientist, and you can be an abolitionist and an example for others. So it's really important, actually, and this is the one thing that's missing here from our panel, is the voice of a trafficking survivor. And recently, whenever I've given a presentation in the US, I've always invited survivors, politically active survivors, to come up alongside of me and to tell their stories, because there's nothing more powerful than meeting someone who has been a slave in modern times and hearing what they need and make them part of the solution. You know, there's a phrase, nothing about them without them. And I think that moving forward in these sort of discussions, they really should be included because they have the first-hand evidence.
This is something I haven't done before, but I wouldn't mind Anne asking you a question, seeing another filmmaker.
Well, all I was going to say to you actually was the people we never see, or don't see enough, of course, are the invisible traffickers. And I don't know how you think that the media can help with that. It's a very difficult thing to get to. You can spend a very long time trying to reach these people.
I've interviewed one, and it was a very sort of frightening 3-hour journey into understanding the mindset of someone who sees human beings exactly as commodities. This man said, "Oh, a woman is like this. She's a piece of goods, a commercial object. We don't care about her feelings. We just threaten her and make her work by force." And it was very interesting to see that it's just a business. There is no humanity, no sympathy involved. People are things to them. But I hesitate to give them the podium. I hesitate to shine, to interview them too much because, you know, they're power hungry like everyone else, and to actually reward them with attention to a certain extent disgusts me. But perhaps it is important, yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit like, I mean, we're talking here a lot about women's rights and children's rights and giving voice to those people. I often wonder whether the situation for women and children is getting worse, not just because of commercial reasons, but for other reasons too, for reasons to do with the devaluation of women and children in our society. I don't know what you think, Mira.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, the lack of value placed on women and the poor and children across the globe certainly is one of the reasons why they are the prey of human traffickers and why society overlooks it.